The real truth is this: the COVID lockdown caused tens of thousands of excess deaths. The chair of the UK COVID Inquiry, Baroness Hallett, recently published her findings on the UK government's response to the pandemic. She concluded that the response was too little, too late.
Nonetheless, I can summarise my findings of the response as too little, too late.
And made the absurd statement that had we locked down 1 week earlier, that 23,000 lost lives could have been saved. A figure based quite incredulously from the mortality model created by Professor Neil Ferguson back in 2020. Remember that genius. The real truth is this: the COVID lockdown caused tens of thousands of excess deaths. This is evidenced by the weekly death data published by the ONS. In early 2020, there was no excess deaths in England. From weeks 1 to 12, the ONS reported negative excess deaths, 4,822 fewer deaths than expected from January to mid-March. The bars in green represent deaths lower than the 5-year average. All whilst a deadly novel coronavirus was said to be circulating. As soon as lockdown was announced by Boris Johnson on the 23rd of March 2020, we immediately jumped into a spike of excess deaths. This is not the kill pattern of a pathogen. This is evidence of deaths being caused by man-made intervention. Over the 10 weeks of lockdown from March to May 2020, England suffered over 50,000 excess deaths, with death rates in April double the 5-year average. These deaths would be blamed on COVID, but in reality, the deaths were caused by the government's COVID response and the treatment protocols. Fear, isolation, loneliness are all killers in their own right. Added to that, denied medical care, hospitals and GP surgeries literally closing their doors to patients. People dying at home from heart attacks and strokes because they were too afraid to go to hospital, or because ambulances refused to transport or resuscitate a patient they suspected had COVID. The real killing fields, however, were in the care homes. Our most vulnerable in society locked down like prisoners with no visitation rights. Human rights breached as they were denied medical care, no GP or ambulance call-outs. Blanket do not resuscitate orders placed on every care home resident, done remotely with no family consent. And then the abuse of end-of-life medication, midazolam and morphine, a deadly cocktail that caused the respiratory suppression, delirium, flooding of the lungs, and then death of thousands of care home residents. NICE protocol NG163, the Liverpool care pathway rebadged for COVID. All blamed on COVID, helped by the government's changes to the death certificate process. No autopsies and no coroner investigations where COVID was suspected. Families told their loved ones would need to be cremated if they wanted a funeral, literally getting rid of evidence. Lockdown ended on the 29th of May 2020. Travel restrictions were lifted, family allowed to visit care homes, pubs were allowed to open, schools went back, and we had Eat Out to help out. Over that summer, with no lockdown, we went through a 3-month period of no excess deaths. Just as pre-lockdown had no excess deaths, post-lockdown we had a period of negative excess. Deaths below the 5-year average, once again in the green bars. The only time we were in excess was during the lockdown. Then the flu vaccine was introduced in the second week of September. Excess deaths then took a small jump. A month later, we were in the tiered restrictions, and then on the 31st of October, Halloween on a full moon no less, Boris Johnson and his 2 CMO henchmen threatened the nation with a second wave and put the country back into lockdown on the 5th of November. Remember, the symbology of the date's not lost on me. What followed, of course, was an inevitable spike in excess deaths once again. Another 20,000 excess deaths that winter. Not only lockdown, but now they had the COVID-19 vaccine from the 8th of December. And again, another spike. Not just in December though. The spike carried through into January and February 2021. the majority of these excess deaths coming amongst the elderly and vulnerable, whom also just happen to be on the JCVI Priority 1 list for the COVID vaccine. The press even reported on care homes being visited by vaccine angels, and then a week later, the morgue was bussing out bodies. Again, classed as COVID deaths, and if it was within 21 days of a vaccine, they were classed as unvaccinated COVID deaths. I understand the outpour of anger at the UK COVID inquiry. Yes, the outcome is disappointing, but then the establishment's first rule is to protect the establishment. Baroness Hallett, by name, is part of that establishment. But do not discount the evidence heard at the inquiry. Do not discount the testimonies of family members that lost loved ones to the treatment protocols. Do not discount the testimonies of the care home managers and nurses that testified to the abuse of do not resuscitate orders and end-of-life drugs that killed their residents. The evidence is there for all of us. The entire modus operandi of the COVID scandemic laid out for all to see. Lockdown, hospital discharge, denied medical care, blanket DNR orders, end-of-life drug abuse, human rights breaches, excess deaths only occurring during lockdown and restrictions, a second wave that followed the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine, a new variant that arrived at the same time as the vaccine, both a byproduct and a marketing tool to drive uptake. Baroness Hallett, there was no pandemic, only a pandemic response that caused the excess deaths of 80,000 people in the UK in 2020 alone. Only a few of us have reported the real truth exposed at the COVID inquiry. Myself and Biology Phenom will not permit the whitewash narrative to wash away the harrowing testimonies and the evidence heard. We absolutely will not stop. Thanks for watching, guys, and please share this video.
The doctor said, "We don't take COVID positive residents to hospital. Order the end of life pack."
I need the oxygen. I need it ASAP because our oxygen levels are dropping down. And she prescribed end-of-life drugs. And we never, ever got the oxygen, ever.
And you explain in your statement that all GPs have put in place DNA CPRs on their patients. Was that all of your patients in the care home?
Yeah. It all had DNRs in place.
And was there, to your knowledge, any consultation with the patient or their families?
No. We found that ambulance drivers and paramedics were not happy to transport any patients to hospital if that needs, like when that lady fell, unless there was a DNR in place. And I'd never come across that before.